Mini episode 1756 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello everyone, welcome to the FDH Lounge. This is the 2024 NFC West preview. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here with my fellow original dignitary in the FDH Lounge, Chris Galloway. We're going through division by division in the NFL, as we do every year, just giving you a general sort of preview of what's going on with the divisions here, and the general baseline for each of these ones comes from Fantasy Football Draftology 2024, available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com. The one run-on sentence for each team, and pages 17 and 18, you'll find those there. Page 18 is where you'll find the NFC teams. We're going to do the NFC West here, uno momento, and it's a division where this is a phrase that I've used specifically in the past, Chris, when I've picked Dallas to make the playoffs, which I didn't do this year, but when I've picked them to make the playoffs, notwithstanding my question about them, that old saying about in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I don't think of the NFC West as a juggernaut, but there has to be a division that yields a couple of different playoff teams. If the East is as weak as we perceive that it might be, the South certainly is, and the North may or may not be ready to yield three playoff teams yet.
Yeah, you're right about that. I have two coming out of the West. So it's they certainly it's a formidable division in my mind on the upswing.
It is.
And that's really a testament to some well-run organizations and coaching. But I have, and I know you'll get into your run-on sentences, but I have the NFC West obviously it's a tough division, but I have the 49ers winning it with 13 wins.
Okay. Wow.
And then I'm going Rams in second with 10 wins.
Okay.
And then I've got the Seahawks with 8.
Okay.
And then the Cardinals with 7.
Okay.
I think the Cardinals are a team that could surge, but I worry that they still have too many holes.
Yeah.
And so the Cardinals are an interesting team to me. I know Vegas is kind of down on them with like 5.5 wins or somewhere around there. But a healthy Kyler Murray, a Marvin Harrison deep threat, they were scrappy last year. And so I kind of like some of what they got going on, but I don't think it's enough I don't think they've got enough. I've got them with, like I said, like 7 wins and maybe 8, surprising people a little bit. The Seahawks, I'm just not a believer in Geno.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't, again, another team with holes. And I don't know that I think they're going to take a step back from what they were last year.
They're a very interesting team to me, and they may be the only real point of disagreement in the division between me and you. Here's how I see it shaping up. I have the division winner also as San Francisco. We graded the Niners a bit harshly in our draft rankings this season, but we did last season as well, and they proved us wrong. But they may have to endure a transitional period at wide receiver, and they may well be weaker in the trenches on both sides of the ball than many would believe. LA Rams, I have them as a wild card. Last year, it seemed that the Rams had succeeded in retooling on the fly, but entering 2024 with needs on the offensive line and the back 7 means that a repeat playoff appearance seems unlikely. Well, I guess in the time between I wrote that sentence and when I did my playoff predictions, I changed my mind slightly. Seattle, The Seahawks hope to be invigorated by a coaching change, but that may not be enough considering the state of their offensive line and lingering issues on defense. I do, however, have the Seahawks. This is not part of my run-on sentence anymore. I do have them as a wild card team, which is testament way more so to the complete lack of depth in the NFC. So just because I'm putting Seattle in there, don't assume that I'm necessarily too high on them. Arizona, they had an incredible draft, starting, of course, with the best overall player in Marvin Harrison Jr., but this franchise is still at least 1 to 2 years from even the edge of contention, and that's assuming that they remain at their current rate of success in rebuilding. So that's how I see this whole thing shaken out here, Chris, and that's where I believe that, largely so, where you and I may disagree somewhat as far as the situation with the Seahawks, I'm giving a lot of credence to the whole thing here, too. One of the most highly touted guys in the offseason as a potential coach, one of the rising stars here, Mike McDonald, him coming to Seattle, the job that he had done in Baltimore with that defense, a lot of people have been taking their hats off to him for that. So I'm looking at a lot of the things with this Seattle team, and I'm thinking that they're probably going to be the best possible version of what they are, which in a way is similar to, you talked about it last year with Arizona, with them being scrappy. I wasn't necessarily the biggest Jonathan Gannon believer, but he kind of turned me around a little bit on that. Indianapolis, I would say kind of much the same as far as what they did when Anthony Richardson went down. Cincinnati, in terms of what Zach Taylor had them doing once Joe Burrow went down. Well, this isn't a situation where they're not going to have their preferred starting quarterback of who's on the roster. They're going to have Geno Smith for better and for worse. But I see Seattle as far as that same kind of team where I think week in and week out, they're going to be the best version of what they are. And I think that's enough to eke in with a very, very slim playoff pool in the NFC.
I don't disagree wildly with that analysis. I just think first-year coaches typically, when they're transitioning the way they are, I think Seattle will be well coached. I think that I, by and large, liked their draft. I mean, Byron Murphy helps out at defensive tackle for them. They're building in the trenches first, which I love. They still have some weapons. Again, for me, it comes down to not a Geno Smith believer. I think he steps back again, and therefore that sort of retards their progress. I do like how they're building. I do like how they're coached. And I do think that the future's bright in Seattle, but I think that they're another off season away. And the thing for them might be long term is, what are you doing at quarterback? Geno's not going to be the long term answer here. He's not going to be the answer after this year. So the big question is going to be, after this year, what are they doing at quarterback?
Right.
In order to be a more complete team. So I just have them, because of circumstance, taking a step backwards, but that's still going to be a tough team, a good team, and I do like what they're trying to do in terms of how they're building that franchise right now. So I'm not down on the Seahawks as an organization or the coaching. I just think they're sort of set up right now for the short term to have a slight step back, because I don't think Geno Smith can continue to deliver to them to the highest level that he has been the last couple of years.
Well, I think that it's, whether it's Seattle or somebody else eking into the playoffs here, I think it is indicative of how the NFC is different than the AFC as they are in a number of ways. I mean, certainly the depth of teams, not the same, and that's a large part of what I'm going to get to here, is that the NFL a couple of years ago, when they did their inevitable expansion now to 7 playoff teams here, to where they can do Super Wild Card Weekend, which I refuse to call it. It's still Wild Card Weekend to me. But in the AFC, you're looking at a situation where you've still got, because again, in my estimation, Baltimore misses the playoffs this year, Miami, you've still got some good teams in the AFC. One way or another, I think there's some good teams that won't make the playoffs, at least 1 or 2 of them. Versus in the NFC, this whole thing, the expansion of the wild card, has been such a gift to organizations perceptually, Because what if we didn't have the extra wild card? Then I wouldn't have Seattle making the playoffs this year, and it would just be a thing of like, oh, well, this was probably play out like, oh, it's a good foundational year one of the Mike McDonald era or whatever. But like, if I'm right and they make it in there, oh, hey, they were a wild card team, year one, things are really going in the right direction. Like, this is where it can really turbocharge things for, like, even if you're just sneaking into the playoffs and you're getting just absolutely turfed in round one, this is where the expansion of the playoffs, particularly in the NFC, is a gift, perceptually, marketing-wise, whatever, to whoever that sucker is that's the last one limping in there.
Well, if you're right about that, McDonald might be, and certainly will be in the running for Coach of the Year.
Yes.
So I do want to talk about the team that we really haven't talked about, and that's the job that they're doing, that McVay is doing in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And of course, I hate to, praise a Miami graduate, but I will.
Me too.
Mostly because he's got our boy Sam Wiglusz still in camp, and still with an outside chance of making that roster. If not there, then certainly looking like he might make the practice squad in Los Angeles. Look, the Rams, Aaron Donald retiring. They've got Matthew Stafford sort of in the waning portions of his career. They've been building. They are not doing the teardown. You and I discussed this, I think, briefly in another section about some other franchises, but they are doing the rebuild as they go.
Yeah.
They are not tearing down the building and starting over. They are not even ripping down to the studs. They are remodeling and keeping the train on the tracks and being competitive. Their depth, their roster, their drafting has been pretty solid. I think that's continuing. McVay has proven that he knows what he's doing. They have an owner that will spend. They have, don't discount it. They have the nicest stadium in the NFL. That thing is amazing. And I've got them surging back in, with 10 wins and getting into the playoffs. They're my pick over there, and I like the fact that the first really 10, 11, probably 11, 12 weeks of their schedule, I think, really sets up favorably for them. So I really like the Rams to do some damage this year and to be a little bit ahead of where I think a lot of people think they're going to be in terms of not only their win-loss record, but in their redevelopment of the roster and to continue moving forward in that winning culture.
Well, you're probably right about that, because I think a lot of us are looking at, I'm looking at the Rams as like a rich man's version, or maybe upper middle class man's version of Seattle, of like, I'm picking them because I have to pick somebody in a very thin NFC. So I'm impressed with what they're doing, maybe not quite as much as you are. I will say, again, the Rams being the league's sort of poster child for why some maybe think that maybe the NFL should have a Ted Stepien rule, but they haven't needed it, I guess, because wasn't the first round pick in 2024 their first one since Jared Goff in 2016? So the drafting they've done has been, notwithstanding never having first round picks over most of the last decade, and what that leads to, again, talked about it with Dallas, is stars and scrubs. Even when they won the Super Bowl, the Rams were sort of the ultimate version of a stars and scrubs team. They still had some holes on that team there. And again, as long as they're in the mode that they're in of, major renovations and everything like that, I don't think they're going to be any kind of less stars and scrubs, because it's kind of baked in with the contracts that they have and everything else like that. And probably the sense, marketing-wise, in LA that in order for, the debt service on the stadium and everything like that, kind of like the Cowboys, right? You can't afford to be too bad. You got to be at least at a certain level if you're going to keep fan confidence and everything like that up there. So that probably has something to do with their approach, the marketing of it, rather than just kind of take a knee, realize that Stafford is at the end, which he's not yet. But when he does get to that point, when he gets to the point where they can't deny it anymore, and it's like, okay, we're going to have to get our next quarterback here, then there's going to be choices having to be made. But the fact that Stafford can keep going, this is a team where, I mean, I think even if you're the ultimate Rams enthusiast, I don't think you can really squint your eyes and see this team making it back to the Super Bowl 3 years after they won it. But again, what they're doing appears to be good enough for their fans, and that's what puts money into the coffers, and that's what I think the organization is most after at this point, to be honest with you. Stan Kroenke and company.
Well, it is a business, so I certainly understand that. And yeah, I mean, Matt Stafford isn't done yet.
No.
He's certainly he's in the fourth quarter of his career.
Mm-hmm.
But there is still more juice to squeeze out of that lemon. And they are committed to squeezing the last bit of football out of Matthew Stafford that they can. I don't have them getting back to the Super Bowl this year, next year, but they're a team that I think is just going to continue to compete for, 9-10 win seasons, be dangerous, be well coached. They draft well. That's the kind of franchise where, they get a couple of these big contracts off the books and, one free agency, couple good signings later, and maybe in a year or so, don't be shocked if they're a 12-win team next year. So I just think overall they're just a well-run franchise. So there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, when you're doing the win now thing as much as they've done over the course of the last almost decade, really, since they got to L.A., that, it's not easy to do and to stay good when you're in the mode of constantly win now, win now, win now, win now, which again, winning now is of a little bit of a lower ceiling than it was leading up to when they won the Super Bowl, because that was their second Super Bowl appearance in a couple of years. And that's where basically they peaked out. But again, they're staying at that level. You're right.
Dude, I got to tell you, there are fans of franchises that would give limbs to have had that stretch.
Yes.
To be like, to have been in 2 Super Bowls, won one, and to be like, okay, so you mean we're going to be an 8, 9, 10 game winner and not get back to the Super Bowl for the next 7, 8 years, but we're going to be really good for a few years, and we're going to get to hoist that trophy. I'll take it. I mean, we're sitting in a city that would take that in a second.
Absolutely.
I don't fault them for that win now approach. It worked. It got them a championship. And again, to their credit, they're not Florida Marlining this thing, right? They're not winning a World Series and then tearing it all down to the foundation, trading everything off, and starting all over with, AA players. They are attempting to remodel on the fly, and by and large, it's kind of working.
Well, whether or not it seems like it, I'm sort of at least taking my hat off to them, because yes, I mean, trying to do the win now, win now, win now, win now, it's not easy. Because you're going to make moves that are at least theoretically going to bite you in the ass later on, and you go that long without having first-round picks, players on their rookie contracts, from the first round, and that's just going to bite you in the ass more and make you stay in the mode of stars and scrubs. So so surmounting their own decided path, it may sound like a mixed compliment, and I guess it is, but it's not easy to stay that good that long when you are at that point. I mean, they took a knee in 2022, but they bounced back last year. I expect them to be indicative of what they did last year. And then at the top of the division here, I mean, this is one of the biggest question marks in football, I think, with San Francisco as far as what the ceiling is. A team that's made the Super Bowl twice in the last 4 years, lost to Kansas City both times. A situation where Kyle Shanahan might be the ultimate coach out there for being able to take a system quarterback and elevate him. And Brock Purdy is probably, at this point, the ultimate example of a system quarterback that could be elevated to elite tier system quarterback. But that combination there, what's the most that it can be when you're in the Super Bowl? I know it was Garoppolo the first time they were in the Super Bowl. It's only been the one time with Purdy. But, I mean, it was still pretty representative last year when you look at it. That approach versus the more conventional approach of we're going to get a no questions asked franchise quarterback and coach him accordingly. San Francisco doing it differently than the rest of the league has paid dividends in the form of 2 Super Bowl appearances over the course of the last 4 years. Now, again, if they don't draw Kansas City in a Super Bowl, maybe it gets better for them, but I don't know. If it's Joe Burr sitting on the other side, I think you're dealing with the same kind of a deal here. So San Francisco if they're facing a team with an elite quarterback coming out of the AFC, assuming they make it to a Super Bowl, what are the odds they can punch through?
As we talked about last year with our Super Bowl predictions and, kind of going over that as we were moving in on it, I picked the Chiefs when most people were starting really picking the 49ers. And I picked them because of Patrick Mahomes. And I'm like, a Super Bowl almost always comes down to the quarterback position. Who's the better? Who do you believe in more to get it done?
Right.
And for me, it was like Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, I'm taking the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Right. Period.
Yeah.
Right. I did the same thing, with the Patriots against the Falcons. Right.
Right.
I'm taking the team with the superior quarterback, and that will continue to be San Francisco's Achilles heel. They're gonna win. They're gonna go 13-4. They're a good team. They're obviously well coached. They're a hard-nosed team. There's talent there, but to your point, they don't have the quarterback when it comes, because whoever comes out of the AFC, to your point, is going to have a superstar quarterback, right? And somehow, if it ended up being, a wild card, Bills team, or if it's the Chiefs again, or if it's, you name it, that AFC team that's coming out of the AFC is going to have a superstar quarterback.
Yeah.
DJ Stroud, maybe, right? Who's emerging. So and again, I think that the 49ers may find themselves in a spot where this time around they'll face in the NFC Championship the emerging quarterback and a guy like Jordan Love, and this time they won't get the benefit of that team imploding.
Right.
Because let's be honest, last year the Packers had them.
Yeah.
And choked. And so does that happen? I think that should have been the end of them, because Love was the better quarterback.
Sure.
So I think that is always going to be their problem at the end of the playoffs, whether it's, late in the NFC playoffs or in the Super Bowl, is facing a superstar quarterback. They're going to be a hard team for me to say that they can get it done.
Well, yeah, and when you look at it historically, when you're looking at the quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls and the quarterbacks that have been in Super Bowls, Brock Purdy may still prove us wrong, but he looks a lot closer at this point in time to Boomer Esiason, Rex Grossman, Stan Humphries. He's better than a couple of those guys, clearly, but then he does, Elway, Montana, Brady, etc. And that's his, his challenge, particularly with the contract that he might be set up for in San Francisco. And this is a guy that, again, they may have to pay that guy $300 million, which is a huge decision they're going to have looming over them, not this year, but in the not-too-distant future.
I'll tell you this. The 49ers aren't going to give him that contract. I'm going to make that prediction now.
Okay.
Because I think that they know that he's not worthy of that kind of money. And I think they know that they'll just go find another Garoppolo, another Purdy that they can win 13, 14 games a year with. I'm just telling you, I will be shocked if Brock Purdy goes and gets some $55, $60 million contract from them.
No.
Somebody's going to give it, foolishly. Probably be Cleveland after Watson. But I don't think it's going to be San Francisco. I don't think they're going to give it to him. I think they know what he is. They're in the building with him. And look, he's a good young man. He's a good quarterback, right? You feel like you're just sort of like trashing him, and I hate to do that.
We're just being honest.
Right? Because he does everything you ask of him to do.
Right.
But he's not Patrick Mahomes.
No.
He's not Josh Allen. He's not C.J. Stroud.
Right.
He's not, So it's like you really go and you pay him and you strap the rest of that roster you're going to have to eliminate a bunch of guys. San Francisco's won because they've had depth and talent across the board.
Yep.
And then gotten by, relatively speaking, cheaply at the quarterback position.
Yes.
And I think that's a formula that they like.
Well, and let's not forget, Trey Lance, that they've been so lucky that Purdy has emerged, because the Trey Lance deal, for as much as I abuse the Browns on the Watson quarterback deal. I mean, let's not forget the Trey Lance deal. Let's not forget sinking the amount of draft capital into that they did, and then just apparently being completely wrong on this. I say apparently just because they only ever let him come out there for flashes of time. And granted, he didn't look good when he was out there and when he was healthy. But again, and from what I'm hearing out of how he's looked in Dallas, it's not been any better. So I guess you could say a draft bust as opposed to somebody that they just cut short too soon. But either way, even if they cut him short too soon or he's a bust, which he looks like, either way, one of the biggest snafus that a team has had draft-wise in the 21st century in the NFL. So, and once again, like I did with the Rams, backhanded compliment. Well, for a team that's win now, win now, win now, which will generally handicap you from winning now every year, they've been pretty successful. San Francisco overcoming their own stupidity in the Trey Lance deal to make the Super Bowl last year is something you have to take your cap off to.
And I do. Because if it wasn't for that Brock Purdy pick and him turning into a serviceable quarterback, we would be eviscerating the 49ers.
Right.
I mean, you can all say it. Trey Lance is a bust.
Sure.
And they gave up everything they gave up to go get a guy who basically started 8 1AA games.
Right.
I mean, my God, Rick, I mean, that is some bad scouting.
Yeah.
And it sounds a lot like Shanahan. He wasn't the guy Shanahan wanted anyway. That was forced onto him.
That's always a mistake.
So, you know, they got lucky that, to your point, they found this kid who salvaged them, and so they didn't get eviscerated by their fans because ultimately they won and went to the Super Bowl. But my God, I mean, if they don't end up with Brock Purdy, you know, it's the Sam Darnold show, and who knows, you know?
Yeah.
Back to our earlier conversation about the NFC North, maybe Shanahan was perfectly comfortable with Sam Darnold and figured he could, you know, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold right in the same position, and God knows he might be able to.
Yeah.
Which again is why I think San Francisco is not going to give him a contract that he's going to ultimately be looking for.
Probably not. And
I mean, what are they paying him this year? Isn't it like $900,000 or something?
Yes. I mean, it's still pretty low. He's still on the old rookie deal and a rookie deal from the guy that was, again, we can't say it enough, the Mr. Irrelevant of the draft. I mean, it's not a thing of like, you know, oh, the guy was just a lowly 6th round pick or even 7th round pick. No, bottom of the 7th round, legitimately the last guy taken. The only way the guy could be a bigger underdog is if he was undrafted altogether. So to be able to make it in this situation, again, hats off to him, hats off to the 49ers for developing him, but it's a thing of just like, what is the ceiling? Because there are guys who will fall in the draft, Chris, who are toolsy kind of guys. And it's just like, well, he never really put it together. Brock Purdy didn't fall because he was, you know, like, oh, the guy's got a real high ceiling, but we don't think he'll ever get there. Brock Purdy fell because he was a high floor guy, and those guys are not sexy because those guys are, generally speaking, not the quarterback that can take you to a Super Bowl, him being the exception to the rule. But being a high floor guy, and probably always going to be such, I don't really see that he's going to advance probably much beyond what he is right now. This is where it gets to be fascinating, and again, this is almost somewhat of a, this is a perfect sort of segue to what our next segment is going to be, which is our early playoff preview for 24-25, because when you're talking about San Francisco, talking about them in terms of how far they can get in the playoffs is legitimately the only thing that you need to be talking about with them. That's the only question. They're going to win this division, barring a big rash of injuries. So it's what are they when they get there? Are they a team that can take that final step? And, you know, in looking at this here again, the thing with, you know, Purdy's the guy that can get you there, as we've said. He's probably not the guy that can get you over the hump.
No, I don't think he can. Not when he's faced with an elite quarterback on the other side. So he's a guy that we expected to be where he was drafted and what he was in college. He was a guy that we thought would be the journeyman, second string, third string quarterback that would bounce around the league for a decade.
Yeah.
And he ended up in a great situation. Again, back to our conversation about where you land matters. and then he's made the most of it. But I think we've already we're at the ceiling with Brock Purdy. We're there.
You know,
there's no more. You know, the roof is the ceiling, and the ceiling is the roof. I mean, there's not this next gear that we're like he's suddenly going to become Patrick Mahomes. It's not happening.
Well, in terms of the complete and utter, I mean, the biggest differences I can think of in recent NFL history, again, nature versus nurture, where you land. Are you in the perfect situation or are you in the worst situation? It's so funny that in talking to you now, remembering that Sam Darnold was his backup last year, I mean, how is Sam Darnold not glaring at this guy 27 like, this MFer lands here and gets Kyle Shanahan to mold him? Like, I mean, Sam Darnold must be a great humanitarian for not having murdered him in his sleep just out of jealousy.
Yeah, well, but it also says a lot to the young man that he outperformed and got the coach's attention and moved ahead of Darnold on the depth chart as a rookie.
True.
So, you know, again, it feels like we're really just, you know, really beating him up. And I hate to sound that way because he's a great story.
Sure.
And he's clearly a fantastic young man with an excellent work ethic, raised right by his parents, etc. So I hate to be like we're, you know, like we're crapping on him because we're not.
No.
He's a great story. And I think he's clearly going to be in this league a long time. But when we talk about whether or not you give him that $55-60 million contract, you know, at the end of next year, I don't think the 49ers are going to do it because, again, I think they see him for what he is. All those qualities aside, they're going to think they can recreate it.
Yeah.
Without having to break the bank. And that's going to be the big challenge for him. That means he's then going to have to go to the Jets or whoever pays him.
Yeah.
Right? The Giants. And be with a dysfunctional franchise and new coaches. And that's going to be the true test of Brock Purdy when he leaves the nest in San Francisco because they're not giving him $60 million.
Yep.
And he has to go and then be the carrier of the franchise. I think that's where that's where the rubber's going to meet the road.
Well, yeah, and that's where you see this in every sport, of where there's always dumb franchises that will take a guy like that and basically round peg square hole him in terms of bringing him into their garbage organization. And the subtext, which they won't admit to the public, is, we just need him to be more than he is. Like, if he goes to the Jets, that's what it's going to be. If he goes to the Giants, that's what it's going to be. Although, again, with Brian Daboll as a coach, with Malik Neighbors as a wide receiver, maybe not. But, I mean, still, there's, you know, the ceiling is not going to be any higher for him than it is here. So, and again, I don't feel like we're beating him to death because, again, in terms of San Francisco, as I said, this is the only relevant question. There's only one question that matters with San Francisco right now, and that's, can they punch through in the end? And this is the defining factor as to whether they can or whether they can't, which you and I have both decided that they can't, and we'll see how that plays out. But like I said, this all segues and sets us up very well for the end of our 2024 preview for the season. Next up, we're going to give you our playoff predictions in the next segment here, our early playoff predictions, and play that all out. Thank you for everything, Chris Galloway, and thank you everybody for checking out our 2024 NFC West preview.